Welcome back to Cheddar, everyone. According to a recent report by the World Economic Forum, it will take close to 100 years to close the global gender gap. But several business leaders have more ambitious goals, and joining us now to discuss is Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group and chair of the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, as well as Rodney Martin, CEO of Voya Financial. Janice, let's start with you. So the recent World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap report revealed the U.S. has fallen 4 spots in rankings. How does that happen? I mean, we're going the wrong way.
It is, but you know, other countries are moving ahead faster, and that's part of the problem. And so what the U.S. has to do is to look at moving more women. Even though we're graduating women at a faster rate than we are men, we're not taking advantage of that. So we're not putting women into top-level positions as quickly as we should, and we're not putting them into more political positions as we should. So we're moving further ahead. I mean, like even countries like Rwanda have more women in ministry positions, and that's just unconscionable. So we have to take advantage of the more educated women we have into job positions and into political positions. And that's really for corporate America to pay attention to and for our government to pay attention to.
Rodney, at your company, Voya Financial, 50% gender parity, essentially, in both the C-suite and on the board?
Today.
How did you get there?
We became a new public company from ING Group. When we started, they had appointed the board. We had the opportunity, as they sold down their interest, to appoint board members. And we really began with that kind of DNA in mind. And I attended this breakfast 4 years ago, listening to what the best practices were. 2 years later, I was back at the breakfast, and we had then appointed 44% of our board. Today, we're at parity. 3 of our 5 board committee chairs are women. Half of my business leaders who are responsible for our earnings are women. And my executive committee is a majority women and minorities. So it's been a very purposeful pursuit. And I don't think there's any accident in terms of what our results have been by the diversity of thought.
Yeah, well, let's talk about those results, because make the business case for this, because I think a lot of people get held up on the idea that it's diversity and inclusion for the sake of diversity and inclusion, but there's a real business case for this.
So when I attended,
it's proven with numbers.
When I attended this breakfast 4 years ago, it really was the who's who that were talking about the best practices, and we really did, as a new company and a new board, embrace that. Our earnings, adjusted operating earnings, have gone up 700 basis points since we've been public. We're double the S&P 500 over that period of time, which is just 5 years at this point in time. So I think the numbers speak for themselves in terms of, you know, we've doubled the S&P 500. We have returned $3.4 billion to shareholders over that period of time, and are dramatically better positioning Voya in terms of the marketplaces that we serve, which is retirement and asset management, than where we were when we started.
Janice, your firm too helps with the search process in getting women as candidates for some of these positions, whether it's in the C-suite or in the boardroom. Have you worked with Rodney at all?
I have. I have put in his general counsel. But also I'd say, you know, Rodney's firm, Voya, has shown better financial performance, but also you can look to Catalyst, Deloitte, the Peterson Institute, Credit Suisse Research Institute. All of these research studies shows very strong correlation of better business results, a very strong correlation of better business results with more women in the boardroom and in the C-suite. So after a while, you have to say, the business case has been made. Why wouldn't you have more women? And also, you have to show your employees, your shareholders, your consumers, and the communities in which you operate that you have more women in the boardroom and the C-suite, because they're your buyers of your stock, your employees, and why wouldn't you do it?
And that's a great point that is very observable over time. That
right.
It's not just our board or our executive committee. It really has impacted our ability to attract and retain talent, men and women, because of the diversity and inclusion, the diversity of thought that's played out.
Janice, I'm curious about what we can learn from other countries in trying to improve the situation here in the U.S. We did mention at the top of the interview that according to the report from the World Economic Forum, we've fallen 4 spaces because other countries have moved so quickly. What are they doing right that we need to do?
So I think if you look at Finland, they're closing that gender gap by like 90%, right, in terms of parity, and in all areas, education, politically, economically, health-wise. So I think that they're taking advantage of this war on talent and basically saying over 51% of the population are women. Why wouldn't you tap into this great wealth of resources? So I think we have to say, why wouldn't we do it here as well? We don't need quotas. I think we should just look at targets. And as you have financial targets in your companies, you should also look to have your great talent targets. And that's what we should learn from. And I think the United States has all of these resources, and why would you not tap into those resources? And that's what I think the U.S. should be doing right now. And I think, we pick up the papers and we see a lot of issues about bad boy behavior. I think you need more women at the table to tap into making decisions about that. And I think, there was a great article in Barron's about the tipping point and, suits against companies. So if you have more women at the table looking at the culture of the company, that also curbs bad behavior in all respects. And I think the risk that companies face today is you must have balance at the table. You don't want a company with all women. You don't want a company with all men. You need to tap into those resources. Companies and cultures across the world have tapped into quotas. We don't need that. I think we just need to make sure that we are really focusing on having the best resources at the table, and oftentimes those resources are women.
Rodney, one of the things that we've heard is that change needs to come from the top down at these organizations when it comes to gender parity. Is that something, a strategy that your company took? And if so, did you find that it worked out?
It's absolutely one that we took. I mentioned that we attended this breakfast when I first went public, and it was very eye-opening in terms of the messages that were playing out. But it was an objective that I had, and an objective that my first lead director and ultimately our board embraced. But it wasn't just at the board level. It was diversity and inclusion at all levels, as Janice has pointed out. If you think about, we have 13.5 million customers, and the majority of our customers, financial decisions are led by women. And we need to look like our customers, across the board. So it was purposeful. And, one of the things that you hear early on was that, there are not enough qualified women candidates. And I could just absolutely say that's, just an excuse. And an excuse that people that want to make. And if you have a different point of view and a different perspective, you can embrace and include and affect the outcome in a very quick period of time.
Like the sounds of this.
All right, Rodney, Janice, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much to both of you for
Thank you.
joining us this morning.
Pleasure meeting you.
Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group and Chair of the Breakfast of Corporate Champions, and Rodney Martin, CEO of Voya Financial, joining us live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange.